Welcome to episode 216 of Girl Take the Lead, where each week we explore womanhood and leadership. And I'm your host, Yo Kenny. Lisa-Maree Blumenfeld, Gen X, joins us to talk about career stages, value alignment, and planning. She is a seasoned HR leader with over 25 plus years of experience across fast growing startups and established corporations. As the founder and CEO of Retain, she and her incredible team have helped founders scale their businesses while building a solid and compliant HR foundation for them. Lisa is deeply passionate about helping startups navigate the exhilarating and sometimes chaotic journey of building high performing teams, whether it's crafting scalable HR strategies, providing executive coaching, or guiding founders through the ups and downs of growth. She brings a rare combination of hands-on experience and empathy to her work. And you'll hear that in this conversation as we discuss some of these great topics like generational differences when it comes to communication, career stages, and when a mid-career crisis can hit like a breaking point. And one last thing we discuss, the importance of giving ourselves grace. A couple of my favorite quotes from this episode were, people can assume HR is a kind of therapist. Yay, I'm not going to do that. That was another great quote. Enjoy. Here you go. Well, Lisa-Maree, welcome to Girl Take the Lead, and thank you for joining us. I think
So
we're going to have
excited to be here.
it's going to be a great conversation, I think. Let's start with you introducing yourself, please, to our viewers and listeners.
Sure. Well, I first and foremost I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Retain. So we do HR support for mainly startups and mid-sized companies. In addition to that, I've helped launch a new company called 11 that is a communication app for employers to speak with their direct reports in a way that's a little bit more intentional and allows for processing and appropriate response with the hope that it would build connective tissue between those using it and hopefully increase the retention of staff within businesses. So I kind of juggle between the two.
Yeah. What do you think are different generational stages that people go through in their careers?
That's a broad question. Generational stages. Well, I think that we've definitely seen a variety of similarities and differences within generational stages as they've come through the workforce. I think, something, and just this kind of ties back to the communication app that we talked about. Communication is one of those that we see being very different amongst the generations. We have, my husband and I, we have two college age students, and they're, dabbling in the workforce a little bit. And a lot of the communication, strangely, that they have is through like texting with their manager and things that, wasn't even available to us and, our parents and that kind of thing when they got into the workforce. And so, a lot of times when within HR, we're helping bridge those gaps to say it's not something that we discourage, right? We don't want to, say that people can't text their manager. There's obviously issues that can come out of some of those things, but helping managers, people who are more seasoned and may not be used to those types of communications, just embrace it a little bit, while also working with newer generations to say, yes, this is the most comfortable to you. And yet here's why we do some different things. This is why some communication should be in email versus text or what have you.
Yeah.
So yeah, communication's a really good example, but I think there's countless examples of some of those generational expectations that are just very different from
Yeah.
to person.
I think when you and I spoke, we talked a little bit about whether there was a mid-career crisis that a lot of people go through.
Sure.
And so looking into a bit of the background there, it sounds like, your kids are starting, right? So
Yeah.
they're looking at possibilities and trying to match that up. And then
Yeah.
the next stage seems to be that you find your path and then you
Hmm.
start looking at, okay, I'm going to become an expert kind of in this area. And
Right.
then the next stage of maintaining, what you've got. I think a lot of our older millennial, young Gen Z, Gen Xers are probably looking at, right? And
Hmm.
then maybe that's where the career crisis happens.
I think you're right. I mean, we're seeing it too, where people are changing careers at this time. They might have been whatever, like a lawyer this whole time, and then they get to a breaking point where they're like, I just don't want to do this anymore, or
Mhm.
I'm now inspired in this other way. And you see people starting to take classes again, especially as school has become easier, not easier in terms of workload, but being able to do online school at, top tier universities, I think has made people feel empowered, and
Mhm.
has also kind of cleared a path for people to it being okay to switch your career. But I do talk to a number of people who are in that uh, generation, if you will,
Mhm.
myself included, that you kind of get to a place where it's like, is this now that I'm at like the second part of this? Is this where I want to be
Yeah.
spending the majority of my time? And, I think a lot of us had the examples of our parents, and I can speak to my parents and my husband's parents of, they all picked a job, they picked a career. And in many cases, both my parents stayed within the same company and retired. And I think that's just something that we don't see happen
Yeah.
anymore because people are switching careers. But more importantly, like there just isn't the tie to the company anymore.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, they had it really locked down with pensions and all of those things with encouraging people to stay. But now without those, people are 2 to 3 years at a company and moving on. And I think in that moving on stage, it's that reflection of, am I just going to go do the same thing somewhere else? Or like,
Yeah.
what's at my core? What is like a passion of mine? And giving yourself the like permission to seek that stuff out.
Mm. What do you think? Like when some of the research indicates that Gen Zers and millennials choose their companies because of their DEI, diversity,
Hmm.
equity, and inclusion policies, or the way in which they take care of the environment and their
Hmm.
stance on um, things that when I was studying my career, I mean, I had no sense of. Like I had
Yeah,
no expectation
sure.
that there would be a company to care about anything other than making more money.
Right. That's
So,
exactly right.
do you think that their choices are going to be like, I know that they're moving faster in their career,
Hmm.
staying less
Hmm.
time at a job, but could it be that they hook with an employer who just kind of checks all the boxes for them, that they might end up staying longer?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really insightful point because, over time, especially when we're building out recruiting strategies for companies, we've had to help coach companies on injecting some of these core values in
Mhm.
a way that's not just the typical core values of like we support each other or
Mhm.
whatever. It's
Mhm.
like here's how we view the world and here's what's important to us even externally of our business. So like you were saying, environmental causes, DEI, like
Mhm.
a number of these different things. And also the historical, like how they actually show up. So when there's crisis in the world, what has the company done in the past to actually back up what they're saying? And
Mhm.
that's where a lot of the research is going for employees. Um, and so those questions are coming up more and more in the recruiting process of talk to me about your DEI, talk to me about what you've done for, you know, climate change or, all of these things, or even like a big one is social justice.
Right.
When tragedy has happened, both locally and worldwide, like how did the company respond? Um, and support their staff during that time. So that's we're getting more of those questions than the questions about like, let's go through the job description.
Mhm.
And I think to your point, I think employees are more willing to stay if they are feeling emotionally connected to the mission of the company and that
Mhm.
the company actually follows through on that mission.
That's a very, very big point, I think. And when the company doesn't follow through
Mm,
and the misalignment happens,
yeah.
the it does seem that the younger generation can smell that out a lot
Mhm.
faster
Yes,
and like ditch it. Like, okay,
absolutely.
these guys
Yeah.
aren't authentic. They really don't
Mhm.
do what they say.
I think that they feel that as an employee and they also feel that as a consumer. So if you just follow, um, as we're recording this, this is January 21st. So there's a lot that's been happening in the last few days.
Mhm.
And if you just even track social media, the posts, the uptick of posts that are about employers that are taking away like immediately in one day, reversing their DEI policies, right?
Mhm.
You're having people who are within those companies questioning whether or not they should stay, but
Mhm.
also they're posting about, I'm not going to, even contribute. I'm not going to shop here. I'm not going to go to these places. And I think that's just like an inspiring thing that the younger generations are ballsy enough to say and do. And I think
Yeah.
we can learn a lot from that.
Yeah. It also creates expectation that
Hmm.
as somebody who's more experienced and we look back,
Yeah.
you get the let's say there's a manager, male or
Hmm.
female, who doesn't practice the culture that is
Hmm.
being perpetuated um, in the company.
Hmm.
That bad manager has always been. I mean, and but if you have this misalignment,
Hmm.
like, and I remember having an incident in my last position where there was a bully in a
Mm.
meeting with me, and I remember thinking, how does this fit into our culture here in this
Hmm.
organization, that they would have a bully at that senior level act this way,
Yeah.
and then I'm the one who's called out for not behaving correctly. And I remember
Correct.
thinking about that,
Yep.
and I look at it for my millennial daughter who's kind of going through something, and I kind of go, yeah, if you have an
Mm.
environment where you've raised the standard and your
Hmm.
managers aren't, I mean, you give them a break and like, oh yeah, bad day. But if they're consistently being,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
included and not put on performance improvement plans and not showing the door,
Right.
you gotta,
Yeah.
I'm sure it creates a lot of like question and that misalignment.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it creates that, but it also creates risk, increasingly more risk for a business. I think certain states, I'm in California, and it's a very employee friendly state. And so there's been more protections for employees who are in these kind of toxic, hostile work environments. And
Mhm.
so, given real clear pathways on how to report these things, and granted, a lot of the times that we have people, I wouldn't say a lot, there are a subsection of reports that come to us that, aren't illegal. They're just crappy. Like,
Mhm.
I'm sorry you feel this way. This is an interpersonal communication breakdown
Right.
between you and your manager, and
Right.
that shouldn't continue. There should be coaching and mentoring for both parties. One on how best to assert yourself, how to stand up for yourself, how to report, and the other one is like, don't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, even from the start of my career to now, we've seen drastic change to support employees in
Uh-huh.
that. But you still see the companies that are rewarding bad behavior, and some of it is just fear, right? If that bully, as you say, if they're a top performer, companies don't want to let them go.
Right.
And yet thankfully, we're starting to see the tides turn a little bit because there can be actual financial risk to the business in keeping someone like that in the business. And so being able to show with data, here's what can actually happen if you allow this behavior to continue,
Mhm. Mhm.
has been helpful in
Mhm.
changing policies and getting support for employees in meaningful ways.
Do you think when I and you can tell me when I bring this up to you, like, you're so far off, but over my 42 years, I sort of learned that the HR department was not about taking care of the employee. They were about taking care of the company and reducing risk for the company. And I've kind of passed that on to my daughters. And I thought,
Mm,
I wonder though if I'm shortchanging things because
mm,
I'm wondering if there are trends given that, you know, inclusivity and authentic core values
mhm.
is not is going to shift HR. It's going to shift the department to be a little bit different. I
Yeah,
don't
I
know. Is
think
it
you.
happening? Can I be more hopeful than I sounded as a pessimist?
No, I think the answer is yes, and I would hope that um, you and I chatting could hopefully change some of your opinions a little bit. I think, look,
Absolutely.
as a whole, what we're trying to do, there's a lot of things we're trying to do, but one of those is reduce risk in general. So
Yeah.
both for the company, but also for employees. And so,
Mhm.
you know, there there's plenty of cases where we're actually doing everything we can to protect and support the employees against the business because
Mhm.
their policies either are not um, they're not in line with where they should be, or they're just not um, following through on those policies. And so, so it's not just reducing risk for the business, but also for employees. But I think if what we're in the best case scenario, right? We're able to work with companies because I'm fortunate enough to work with a lot of different companies at one time, and our philosophy and our hope is that we're able to come in and say, look, here's the policies that you currently have, here are the ones that you really need to have. Let's put together something that's very clean, very well understood, but also there's accountability on both parts, the
Yeah.
employee and the managers, leadership, whatever, to believe in this and live these policies. And if there's not, let's figure out what we need to do because we need to agree that this is what we're going to do. And if that happens, then we're really freed up to figure out how can we make the employee experience the best experience
Yeah.
there is, right? It
Yeah.
frees us up to say like, great, let's get really creative about benefits, right? Let's
Yeah.
make sure that we have the best benefits. And if we're fighting all of these legal policy things all the time, it doesn't allow for leadership to really focus and care on the things
Yeah.
that are beneficial for employees. Um, and I think sometimes we have to draw boundaries too, because sometimes people assume that HR is like we act as therapists, and
Yeah.
we are not qualified. We are not. Most of us are in therapy. Like we're not here to do that. And so I think that can put them
Okay.
and the company at risk if we start to do that. So, unfortunately, sometimes we are giving these messages of like, hey, I'm really sorry, this is the situation you're in, and yet it doesn't go against a policy. So like you really need to talk to your manager. I can help you like um role
Yeah.
play, if you will, and like really kind of practice how you can have those conversations, but this isn't an HR issue.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes those messages make it feel like we're not there to support, which
Yeah.
is
And
unfortunate.
I have been, what I've seen in the last few years has been, um, and I don't mean to be so pessimistic. I mean,
No.
on the other, on the positive side, HR has been behind mental health
Hmm.
and programs like Better Up and others being used
Hmm.
on the corporate level.
Right.
God, that's terrific. And
Yeah.
the other thing that I saw was that, um, and I'm so, and we'll watch and see what happens with DEI, but a lot of the different groups could come together under DEI and
Hmm.
share their experiences. Nobody had to be an expert, but I thought, this is so terrific. My maiden name is Chavez. And when I
Mm.
was going through, there was no, I mean, you did not want to be identified as Mexican at all. I
Right.
mean, it was like you didn't want to have the attention and you
Hmm.
wanted to assimilate. And when I see people celebrating their
Yes.
differences and their diversity, and I'm like, oh my God, another hallelujah. And
Yeah.
those things are definitely coming out of the whole HR um, world. And I'm so, I think it is shifting a bit. And I love the idea that you've mentioned that it's reducing risk all around for everybody. I think that's a
That's
great vision.
that's the hope, right? I
Yeah.
mean, look, being a human is hard. um, Working is hard. The balance of, work life, everything is just challenging. So if we can really focus on removing as many roadblocks as we can so that people can be successful and businesses can be successful, and there's a level that's not always perfect, but a
Yeah.
level of harmony and celebration and support and empathy, then like I
Mhm.
feel like we've done the best we can do. And we don't do the best all the time. Um, Sometimes it's hard to hold space
Oh,
all
sure.
the time. But I think, I love what you said about feeling hopeful and optimistic about a lot of these things. Your background, mine's kind of the opposite in that I married into, and my married name is Blumenfeld, which is obviously very Jewish. And so it's been an interesting learning experience for me being on the side of having some of those comments and expectations and things. And so, it's very real for people. It's very real in the workplace. And so sometimes these policies seem like an overreach, but much like any rule or policy, you have to have it because someone actually did something. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So, like when you see on a coffee cup, like, be careful, it's hot, it's because they actually had to put it on there because, like, it had to be explained, right? So, some of these policies that are there that seem, like I said, an overreach,
Yeah.
it's because we have to make sure that it's super clear so we can protect as many people as we can.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, we we had on our list to kind of talk about assessment tools to help us understand parts of ourselves. And I know you had
Mhm.
some thoughts about the Enneagram.
Mm,
And I know I've taken the Gallup, and I actually remembered after you and I spoke that I had done the Enneagram back in
did.
2021.
Okay.
And that would have been like right when I um, was transitioning from corporate to being
Hmm.
a podcaster.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And
Um,
it was it. I do think they help us. I did see some continuity between the Enneagram and the Gallup
mhm.
Strength Finder.
Yeah.
So that was kind of interesting to see. I mean, it seems like companies use this more and more to
Mhm.
help their employees. Is that your thought on that too?
I think I found it to be a helpful tool, whether it be the Enneagram or DISC or Strength Finder. There's so
Yeah,
many,
yeah.
right? And we've worked with most of them, but I would say that it's helpful because people come into any place, right? A workplace or relationship or whatever, with the belief that they really know themselves, and know how they show up and how what they're saying is being translated. And I would say that there's going to be a period of time where you recognize that that's not the case.
Hmm.
You don't really know. And so I think it's really important to be able to take a minute and say, with like humility, maybe I don't know how I'm showing up, right?
Hmm.
Maybe I assume that I'm um, uh, really like coming across in these really positive ways, but maybe it's just not. And so I think to be able to better understand how you communicate, how people hear it
Hmm.
and respond, how you show up when you're stressed, what do you do? What are your patterns of behavior when you're feeling successful? So I think it's really important. And you're right. Like, I think it's funny that it tracks with when you made a big career shift. Because I think
Hmm.
it's kind of that, and I wouldn't call it like a midlife crisis or whatever, but like it is that time where you're like, wait, is this what I want to do? And like, there's a lot of questions. And so
Yeah,
I think being able to look at yourself in a different way and having some helpful tools to make some of those things really obvious. I know that when I took the Enneagram the first time, it's a test, but it's based off of your core motivation. So it's like more suggestions on your answers. But I didn't love my answer. I didn't love it. I wanted to not be that and wanted to push back, which was like very, very tied to the number. Like it was like already proving that to be the case by my response.
uh-huh.
Um, so I found that to be helpful, um, not just in me learning about myself, but also learning about the people around me and who they are and how they show
Hmm.
up in those ways and how does that dovetail well and how does that maybe conflict with how I show up, and being able to really know that. And so I think taking that information and using it in the workplace can be really helpful, with that like interpersonal communication, um, issue that can just be
Absolutely.
so hard sometimes to give
Yeah.
people some additional context, um, and in many cases like a buffer. That knowledge can be helpful.
We did an episode a couple weeks ago where we talked about talk types.
Mm-hmm.
And the cool thing that that our guest told us was that we listen through our talk type. And
Mm,
it didn't I had never really thought about it before, but
yeah,
it's where we come from.
sure.
Whenever like okay, so if my strength finder, my number one was connectedness. No
Mm.
surprise. Connecting
Nope.
people. But I listen and can make the assumption that everybody cares about
Mm.
connectedness.
Mhm.
It's my default. So
Right.
when we like, I think another something you're saying is that when we know these things about ourselves, we can also say, okay, not
Mhm.
everybody's going to be caring about connectedness.
Right.
And um, there are tons of other things that people are strong in
Mhm.
that you are not. So
Yeah.
you can learn and you can um, have them help you.
Right. Yeah. I have a couple people on my team who are like within the Enneagram, they're nines, which is, and there's better ways to communicate this, but just for our purposes, they're like the people pleasers,
Yeah.
you know, and
Peacemakers.
Yeah, and I have to remind myself that when they're responding by saying, "Yeah, no problem," they might have a lot of stress about it, but I won't know, and I'm not a 9. And so, I have to like, it's really important for me to remind myself that, like, when they're saying no problem, there might be a problem. And so I have to do the work to kind of peel back the layers and
Yeah.
find out, how are they actually feeling? Because to your point, I just assume everyone's very vocal about how they feel about things, which is not the case. And when someone like me, who
Yeah.
is very vocal about those things, come in, it can make those people shut down even more. Right. So I
Uh,
think knowing that has helped me figure out the best ways to communicate with my
yeah.
team. Um, but it is interesting your comment about, assuming that everyone is
Yeah.
focused on
I
the same things.
I knew that I expressed myself that way, but I didn't realize that I listen
Mhm,
that way too.
mhm.
And that was really good. Um, yeah, that was really very good.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
an insightful
So
comment for
I'm
sure.
a type 3 on my Enneagram. I went and looked just, because I
Okay.
had done it back in 21, but it was I went, achiever? Who would that be?
That's
I had to
funny.
laugh and go, "Oh, Yolanda, you were born that way,"
Right.
and it's always been a characteristic, and so there was no mistake on my end.
Right.
Type 3.
But I loved your reaction of like, "What? That's not right." And then you take a minute and you're like, "All right, that's totally right."
It's been that way since birth.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, well, we did have one other question
Mhm.
about what are things we might do if we've had a plan on how our career was supposed to go.
Uh-huh.
And maybe, we have to shift, make
Mhm.
changes from that
Yeah.
plan.
Right.
Um, I definitely think that, an assessment tool is helpful. Um, but there's also, I was talking with somebody today
Mhm.
who, at the end of their career, felt shortchanged. And I don't
Mm.
think that's unusual. I think
No.
there is like you had a vision,
Mhm.
and like I never became a CEO. I became
Mhm.
a senior VP of marketing and I was an executive
Yeah.
VP over here, but I never became the CEO.
Mhm.
And today I am totally at peace with that because it was not
Right.
my skill set.
Mhm.
I am so creative.
Right.
To make me a CEO would have been not a good not a good fit for you. Not at all.
I think you
Um,
could have been great at it. I think maybe
but
you
I would have
could
driven a lot of people crazy though, because I would be going, well,
could have
what
been
about
fun.
this? What about that? Did you try this? No, I think I would drive them nuts. But I know that there are people who get to the end and
Mm.
go, I didn't do enough, or
Mm.
that plan. I don't know. What do you think? I mean,
I think that's probably pretty common, but I think I think the plan, if you will, um, is not always rooted in not necessarily reality, but like things happen,
hmm,
right? And so sometimes you're forced to make a choice. You're forced to make some sort of pivot. I've had a close friend of mine who had was faced with horrible illness, and so
mhm,
like couldn't continue in her career, and she was like crazy hyper focused, and so
mhm,
like I could see the stress and the frustration on her part in feeling like she wasn't able to fulfill the things she was supposed to fulfill. And yet it's like you did everything you
mhm,
could have done and something happened to you. In other cases, people make a decision, right? Like this isn't fulfilling, or I'm actually going to choose this other thing, or I'm going to choose this person who, in order to be in this, I'm going to have to move, or what have you. I just think that it's really important to do the best you can in learning about grace, extending it to others, but really extending it to yourself. And like,
Mm.
a plan is fine to have, but also like without any sort of flexibility, that can be really, really restrictive. Um, and you might miss out on awesome opportunities to do all kinds of crazy stuff. I think had, I talked to you when you were the SVP and said, "Hey, you're going to like run this awesome podcast later," you might have been like, "Are you out of your, who are you? Stop it." But I think that those things, are just
Yeah.
awesome opportunities if you're willing to take them. And, if you get to the end and you're um, feeling regret, I would venture to bet a lot of people, most people have something, even though they say like, "I don't regret anything," but like, yeah, you do. Everyone has that thing where they're like, "Oh, I
Yeah.
wish I would have done that differently or better," or what have you. I think the best thing to counter that is learning to and actually practicing giving yourself a lot of
Mm.
grace. Um,
I love that.
Shit happens, you know?
So I got one more question for you.
Yeah.
Are Gen Zers and
Mhm.
millennials, research says they have, most of them have some kind of side hustle going
Mm,
on.
mhm.
Um, whether it's, a product that they're inventing or a service
Yeah,
that they're doing. Um, I coming up in my career, who had the bandwidth to do that?
right.
But they seem to be so much better about maybe putting a boundary in around
Mhm.
work so that they can have that side
Mhm.
hustle going on. Um, I don't know. What do you see there? Because I definitely think it's different for them. I'm
Yeah, I think the boundary thing is a really interesting topic, because I think previously your role was like one of the main things that defined you, right?
right.
People would say, "Hey, I'm Lisa and I'm a founder of this." Like it, and you're at a happy hour or just meeting people, and like what you do for work was one of the first things that come up, and then the conversation spins from there. Whereas I feel like now work is just kind of what people do, but it's like they're talking more about their passions and um, things that they find interesting, and where they're volunteering their time, and those types of things are much more important. And you almost get to a place where they get and I've seen this with kids, like frustrated when you talk to them about work, because they're like, "That's just like boring to talk about. Work's work." And like, who cares, and I think so there's boundaries,
Um,
but then on the opposite side of the boundaries, I would say that, when we were coming into our careers, and like, our parents before us, there was actual technological boundaries. You
mm,
had a desktop at work, and once you turned it off, you went home, and then
yeah.
you came. But now with, everything being on our phone, and everyone's plugged into their headsets and they're answering
Mhm.
calls, there's no boundaries, which almost makes it more free, because that means that they
Yeah.
can juggle things throughout the day.
Hmm.
um
Hmm.
so I don't know, I think it's a really interesting thing to see right now,
Yeah.
how some of that happens. But I do think the workforce coming in and being able to say like, "Yeah, I'm not going to do that.
I
here's
know. It's so great.
here's what I said I would do." And like, if you want me to do those, I'm happy to discuss it and negotiate it. But before, it was just like you were just doing whatever you were told to do. So there has been a
Yeah.
big shift. I think it's fascinating and interesting to watch happen. It's also extremely frustrating for other generations to try to manage, because they're like, "What do you mean no? Like, it's your job." So, we're kind of at the middle of that, trying to translate.
Yeah.
between the two.
Yeah.
And, because the stuff is happening, then you have to figure out how to make policies. So you're seeing companies say, like, you cannot have a side hustle. And you're like, well,
Yeah.
how do you monitor that? Like, and the example I use, especially with executives, is like, well, that's not fair because you're working here, you're also on 3 other boards. So like lead by example, you're doing it too. So
Yeah.
where's the line? Um, and I just think younger generations aren't sitting on boards, but um, they're doing some really cool stuff. So,
Yeah.
if as long as it doesn't interfere with their job description and their OKRs, then and doesn't like breach any sort of IP or confidentiality,
Yeah.
then like
Yeah.
go for it. It's just interesting to see how they juggle it.
Yeah. And how burnout shows up for them, because it does seem with their connectedness to
Mhm.
technology that it could be happening faster.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw it, but there was a video of someone who had posted recent, like very new to the workforce, very first job out of school. Um, and this female had posted this video about how much work sucked because it was all day and she didn't have time to go to the gym and she hadn't seen any of her friends. And instead of going to happy hour, she's doing laundry and going to bed because she's tired. And like, this is not scalable. And it was so like, I know funny is the wrong word here, but all of us watching it were like, yeah, welcome. Guess what? One day, if you have kids, this will be the most relaxing part of your career. So we do get that from on the HR side with people who are coming into the workforce of feeling very burnout, not able to manage their time because they are missing that connectedness. They haven't seen their friends. They haven't figured out the balance of
Yeah.
doing laundry and going to the gym. And so, I don't want to break their spirit, but it's also kind of like, yeah, this is what work is. So, we've had to figure out the best, most supportive ways to have those conversations and help
Yeah.
people jump into that. But I think it is it's a shift. And I think also we have a lot of people who um not only were they going to school, and that starts the process of you learning how to juggle your time and resources and whatever, but it was during COVID.
Yeah.
So everyone was home. So you
Yeah.
had all the time in the world to work out and
Uh-huh.
whatever. And now to kind of have that in this big block of time that you can't do those things, I think is just a much more dramatic shift for
Hmm.
this group of people coming in than it has been before, maybe even after. Um, and I will just have to say about the after part, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, let's talk again.
love it. It
Give
was
it
really
some
fun.
time and we'll come back and go, what do you think?
Yeah, now that it's been X amount of time, let's
Oh,
figure it out.
well, Lisa-Maree, it's just been so great.
I love
Thank you
talking to
for
you.
just, flowing with me a bit on some of these
Yeah,
questions that were coming up. But
so fun.
anything else that are it's on your mind that you want to share with the audience or
Mm. I mean, you're getting me at a really weird time given
I know
the
changes happening.
political climate. And we've touched on a few of the things we're already seeing drastic change, DEI, et cetera. So
Mhm.
um, I think for me, it's just like that whole extending grace thing is something I'm reminding myself and my team about a lot right now. I think mental health for a lot of us is this is a critical time to be really, really honest about that.
Mhm.
The needs for it, the resources for it, and just supporting yourself and the people that you love, I think is really important right now because it is a very strange, uncertain time for a lot of people who are impacted by a lot of very recent and continuing dramatic change. So that I would say is like top of mind, and the majority of my calls the last 2 days is just the uncertainty and how people can understand the world around them, but also
Yep.
plug in and out
And
of
out.
different things in a way that they feel safe.
Mm.
And I don't have the answers, but
That's okay. But so I think our viewers and listeners are going to want to get in touch with you. I mean, you have a terrific viewpoint on HR and how you can help your clients. So how can they get in touch with you and follow you?
yeah, anyone can reach out at any point. My email is just lisa@retainhr.com. Our website is retainhr.com. So that or LinkedIn or what have you, I'm happy to jump on a call and also recognize that there are companies that are going through stuff right now. So even though you may not be a client, I'm happy to jump on a call and just brainstorm through certain issues because there's a lot. There's a lot
That's a
going on.
great offer.
So yeah, anytime, happy to help.
So I think I might know how you'll answer this, but what would you tell your 20 something self today?
Oh gosh, my 20-something self. I really wish I could like shake her around a little bit and be like, you think you know everything and you know nothing. You know nothing. Listen to your parents. You don't have to let them know you're listening, but like they actually know what they're talking about. I think at that time, hopefully this is common. Maybe it was just me. I felt like there's so much writing on knowing exactly who I was and what I was going to do and kind of proving that out constantly. And just, I don't know why, but like, I, I wish I wish I could tell that person to just take a
Yeah.
deep breath, like go have a really good time right now because you're going to be working soon.
A long time.
So like go do weird stuff now. But like kind of what I've said throughout is just things are not going to happen the way you thought. They're just not. So like this plan you have, like it's great to have some sort of plan, but you have to inject some, like I said, some grace and
Yeah.
just be open to all the opportunities that come your way. Say yes as much as you can, and learn from all of it. God, I wish I could just go back and tell her that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. So did you have a chance to go to our online store? Did you see any
Yeah.
card or gift that you liked?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I did say I love the messaging on a bunch of them. Very creative.
Thank you.
It's just like not a skill I have, but yeah, your cards, all of it is just like so beautiful. And um, I don't know, I'm very impressed that
Thank
you
you.
have
Thank
there.
you. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so
Thank
much
you,
for having me
Lisa.
on. It was great.
Thank you for listening today, and we sure hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave a comment wherever you listen to your podcasts. Tell a friend about us. Join our public Facebook group, Girl Take the Lead, or visit our website, girltaketheleadpod.com. We also have a YouTube channel where your subscription would be appreciated. Once you're on YouTube, search at Girl Take the Lead. And we've recently expanded to YouTube Music, where you can find a video of this episode, and you can also find one on Spotify. Here are 3 episode takeaways. 1, alignment to core values is super important for younger generations. 2, assessment tools can help us see how we communicate and show up for others. And 3, plans are not always rooted in reality. Things happen and we need to pivot. You can miss something awesome happening if we're too rigid. Giving ourselves a lot of grace when things don't work out as planned. Our next episode will feature our guest, Susan Combs, author and founder of Pancakes for Roger, Inc., a not-for-profit corporation dedicated to serving those who have served our nation. The nonprofit emerged from a humble request by Susan's father, the late Major General Roger E. Combs, during his hospice care. His simple wish for pancakes sparked a movement which became a book and a keynote address. Now it stands as a nonprofit organization. While the pancakes themselves couldn't be served due to care restraints, the essence of this request transcended the breakfast table. It's a very touching reminder to cherish life's small joys and express gratitude for them. Talk to you soon. Bye.